It all began one rainy afternoon when Marcus was cleaning out the basement of their suburban home in Charleston. He had always been meticulous about the house, a habit ingrained after years of managing his career and family life. Amid stacks of forgotten boxes and dusty shelves, he stumbled upon an old leather-bound journal. The initials on the cover read LP, and as he flipped it open, a cold knot of unease tightened in his stomach. The handwriting inside was unmistakably Lydia's. Marcus's eyes scanned the first few entries, and immediately, disbelief and disgust flooded over him. These were not innocent notes or childhood recollections. They were detailed accounts of secret encounters, passions, and betrayals. Each word seemed to claw at the trust he had placed in his wife for the past 15 years. Lydia, hearing the rustle of pages, descended the stairs cautiously. "Marcus, it's just an old diary, from my 20s, she said, her voice soft, attempting to soothe the tension. "It doesn't mean anything now." But Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he held the journal, the faint smell of old paper mixing with the scent of damp wood in the basement. He didn't respond immediately, his mind racing with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Turning the pages, he found entry after entry describing romantic encounters with other men, detailed in ways that made his stomach churn. One name in particular made him freeze: Julian. The journal painted Julian as someone deeply entwined in Lydia's past desires, someone Marcus had never suspected, yet now seemed so present through her words. Lydia tried to explain, her voice quivering. "That was a long time ago. It was before we met, before Deacon was born." But Marcus could not shake the feeling of betrayal, the deep, gnawing realization that a part of her had always existed outside of their marriage. As the afternoon light waned and shadows filled the basement, Marcus's mind spiraled further. He found photographs tucked between pages, images of Lydia with 5 different men, smiling in ways that seemed intimately familiar to someone else. Each picture hit him like a physical blow, reinforcing the sense of a life lived behind his back. The pain was compounded by anger, disbelief, and the helpless feeling that he had been deceived, not just in the past, but all along. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice steady, but cold. I can't stay here anymore. You need to go. To your parents' house. Tonight." Lydia's eyes filled with tears, her hands shaking as she gathered her belongings. She paused at the doorway, clutching a family photograph, a silent plea for understanding that Marcus refused to meet. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside, and with that she left, leaving Marcus in a silence that was suffocating, yet oddly clarifying. Word of the incident traveled fast through their small town. Friends whispered behind closed doors, neighbors exchanged glances, and Lydia's parents were left stunned, confused by Marcus's outrage. Lydia, ashamed and humiliated, chose to shield them from the full truth, fearing their disappointment more than facing the judgment of the world. Meanwhile, Marcus began the difficult task of explaining to their children, especially their teenage daughter, the reality of Lydia's betrayals, an act that fractured not only their marriage but the sense of security that the children had always felt. By the time the first night had passed, Marcus knew the coming days would be even harder. Conversations about trust, lies, and family loyalty loomed large, and the foundation of their life together seemed irreparably shaken. Yet beneath the anger and heartbreak, a resolve began to form. He could not undo the past, but he could protect what was truly his children, his dignity, and the truth that would ultimately set them free. The next morning, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The house felt empty, too silent, and yet heavy with the memories of betrayal. Their daughter, Emily, had sensed the tension immediately. She approached hesitantly, her eyes wide and uncertain. "Dad, what's happening?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Marcus took a deep breath, realizing he could no longer shield her from the truth. He explained, carefully choosing his words, that her mother had been unfaithful for years, and that the journal he had found contained evidence of multiple affairs. Emily's face twisted in shock and anger, and the disbelief in her eyes cut deeper than any pain Marcus had felt. "Mom, she lied to us? To me?" she whispered, voice breaking. Marcus nodded grimly. "Yes, Emily. There are things you need to know, painful as they are. I want you to understand so you're never hurt like this again." As the day unfolded, the weight of betrayal grew heavier. Emily's hurt turned to anger, and then to determination. She demanded a DNA test to confirm something Marcus already feared, that she might not even be his biological daughter. The tension in the house reached a peak as Lydia returned to gather the rest of her things. She tried to reason with Marcus, to appeal to some lingering love or mercy, but Marcus's expression was hard, unyielding. "It's too late for excuses, Lydia. Your choices have consequences," he said firmly, his voice calm but filled with resolve. Emily's decision to take a DNA test was swift and decisive. She wanted answers, clarity in the chaos. When the results came back, they confirmed Marcus's worst suspicions. He was not Emily's biological father. The revelation struck like lightning. Emily collapsed into Marcus's arms, sobbing, realizing that much of her life had been built on deception. Marcus held her tightly, whispering reassurances, though inside he was boiling with a mix of grief and rage. Determined to regain control over the shattered pieces of his life, Marcus made the difficult choice to move to Florida, seeking a fresh start, away from the gossiping eyes of their small town. Emily reluctantly agreed, understanding that the move was necessary to escape the shadow of her mother's betrayals. Lydia, meanwhile, oscillated between pleading and indifference, unaware that her daughter's newfound awareness and Marcus's determination were closing the door on her manipulation. When Lydia returned to the house one last time to collect the remainder of her belongings, the tension was palpable. Marcus confronted her with all the evidence he had gathered: the journal entries, the photographs, and the undeniable truths she had tried to hide. Their conversation was raw, charged with years of betrayal and pent-up resentment. Lydia tried to justify herself, speaking of youthful mistakes and lost loves, but Marcus's focus was clear. The damage she caused was real, and he would no longer allow her to control or deceive anyone. Meanwhile, whispers of Lydia's past spread rapidly throughout their community. Friends expressed concern, neighbors whispered, and family members were stunned. Emily, torn between anger and curiosity, sought to understand the depth of her mother's duplicity. She began to see the fractures in the life she had known and the necessity of trusting her father's judgment. Marcus, on the other hand, became resolute in protecting his remaining family, Emily and their son Lucas, ensuring that they would not be pawns in Lydia's ongoing games. As days turned into weeks, Marcus started rebuilding a sense of normalcy. He focused on Emily and Lucas, guiding them through school, extracurriculars, and everyday life. The anger towards Lydia remained, simmering just beneath the surface, but Marcus channeled it into protecting his children and preparing for the eventual confrontation that would ensure justice was served. In the quiet moments, he reflected on the betrayal, the loss, and the lessons learned. He realized that while he could not undo the past, he could shape the future for his children, a future rooted in honesty, stability, and protection from deceit. In the following weeks, Marcus meticulously documented every interaction with Lydia. Every phone call, every message, every attempt she made to manipulate the children or sway public opinion was recorded. He knew that to protect Emily and Lucas, and to ensure Lydia could not continue her deception, he needed a concrete plan. With the guidance of his lawyer, he began gathering evidence, seeking to establish not just the emotional impact of Lydia's actions, but the legal foundation to safeguard his children's future. Emily, though still grappling with the revelation about her parentage, became more mature beyond her years. She confided in Marcus, admitting the confusion, hurt, and even resentment she felt towards her mother. Marcus listened without interruption, offering comfort and validation. He encouraged her to express her feelings openly, to understand that her mother's actions were never a reflection of her worth. Together, they built a system of communication that allowed them to navigate the complex emotions of betrayal, loss, and loyalty. Lydia, meanwhile, attempted to maintain her facade. She reached out to Emily with gift-laden packages, messages of false remorse, and promises of a better future together. Marcus intercepted much of this communication, carefully monitoring her influence. He recognized her tactics, emotional bribery, gaslighting, and attempts to rewrite the narrative. Each attempt she made to regain control over her children only strengthened his resolve. Marcus documented these efforts, knowing they would be crucial in court. Tensions escalated when Lydia tried to involve extended family members. She painted herself as the victim, attempting to turn grandparents and cousins against Marcus. However, Marcus's careful documentation and clear communication prevented any manipulation from taking root. Emily observed this and began to understand the stark difference between her father's consistency and her mother's deceit. Slowly, she started to rebuild trust, realizing that Marcus was the stable anchor in the chaotic storm Lydia had created. As the legal process advanced, Marcus filed a petition to modify the custody arrangement, seeking primary custody and restricted visitation rights for Lydia. His lawyer presented the evidence, the journal entries, the multiple affairs, the manipulation attempts, and most importantly, the impact these actions had on the children's emotional well-being. The court recognized the gravity of the situation, granting Marcus temporary primary custody and initiating supervised visits for Lydia. This was a victory, but Marcus knew the fight was far from over. Amid the legal proceedings, Marcus focused on rebuilding normalcy at home. Emily and Lucas resumed their activities, schoolwork, and hobbies, supported by Marcus's unwavering presence. He established routines, organized family projects, and created an environment of trust and stability. Meanwhile, Lydia's attempts to interfere became more desperate. She tried to contact Emily directly, sent letters to Lucas's school, and even reached out to Marcus's friends, hoping to gain leverage. Each attempt was met with firm boundaries and legal warnings. The community's whispers about Lydia's past began to surface publicly. Some neighbors expressed surprise, others judgment. But Marcus chose to focus on the truth rather than gossip. Emily found reassurance in seeing her father's integrity, understanding that the respect he commanded was rooted in his consistent actions rather than rhetoric or rumors. Lucas, though younger, sensed the stability Marcus provided and grew more confident in the presence of his father's guidance. The turning point came during a supervised visit. Lydia attempted to manipulate Emily, pleading for her trust and making promises of a future that seemed idealized and false. Marcus recorded the visit discreetly, capturing the coercive tactics and the impact on Emily's demeanor. This evidence became central to the next court hearing, solidifying Marcus's position that unrestricted visitation posed emotional risks for the children. Through all this, Marcus maintained a balance between firmness and compassion. He never allowed his anger towards Lydia to cloud his judgment. Every decision he made was measured, documented, and aimed at protecting Emily and Lucas from further harm. In private moments, he reflected on the betrayal, on the marriage that had once been filled with love, and on the necessity of turning pain into action. As the legal proceedings continued, Lydia's influence waned. The court began to recognize patterns of deceit and manipulation, while Marcus's consistent involvement in the children's lives highlighted his dedication and reliability. Emily, gaining confidence in her father's decisions, started to express her thoughts more openly, contributing to a sense of empowerment and clarity. Lucas, young as he was, adapted quickly to the routine, feeling secure in Marcus's protective presence. By the end of this block, Marcus had laid the groundwork for the final legal and emotional resolution. He had secured temporary primary custody, gathered irrefutable evidence of Lydia's manipulations, and reinforced the emotional stability of Emily and Lucas. The path forward was still challenging, but Marcus was no longer reactive. He was in control, determined to ensure that Lydia could not disrupt their lives any further. The final court hearing arrived, bringing months of tension, evidence, and emotional turmoil to a head. Marcus entered the courtroom with Emily and Lucas beside him, feeling a sense of resolve. He had prepared meticulously, armed with documentation of Lydia's affairs, manipulations, and attempts to control the children's perceptions. The judge listened intently as Marcus's lawyer laid out the evidence, highlighting the impact of Lydia's behavior on Emily and Lucas. The room was silent, every word weighted with consequence. Lydia appeared confident at first, attempting to charm the court with tears and proclamations of change. She argued that she wanted a meaningful relationship with her children, that past mistakes should not define her, and that Marcus was being overly controlling. However, the amassed evidence told a different story. Journal entries, photographs, intercepted messages, and recorded interactions painted a clear picture of deceit, betrayal, and manipulation. The judge's questions were precise, and Lydia's answers faltered under the weight of truth. Emily was allowed to speak briefly. She expressed her feelings carefully, explaining how her mother's past actions had caused confusion and hurt, and how she valued the stability her father provided. Her words, mature and heartfelt, reinforced Marcus's claims. Lucas, too young to articulate complex emotions, clung to his father, symbolizing the trust and security Marcus had worked tirelessly to build. When the ruling came, the courtroom seemed to exhale collectively. The judge granted Marcus primary custody of Emily and Lucas, confirming that Lydia's visitation would be supervised and limited until further review. The court emphasized the importance of emotional stability, stating that the children's well-being took precedence over Lydia's desires. Additionally, The judge ruled that Lydia had no legal claim over financial obligations concerning Marcus's children, invalidating her demands for contributions to activities or expenses not related to Emily and Lucas. Lydia's face paled. The reality of her actions, the repercussions she had long ignored, finally confronted her. For the first time, Marcus saw her vulnerability, not as a mother wronged, but as a woman who had miscalculated and underestimated the consequences of betrayal. She had manipulated, lied, and tried to rewrite history, and now she faced the legal and emotional boundaries she had attempted to evade. With the court proceedings concluded, Marcus returned home, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. He prioritized rebuilding life with Emily and Lucas. Together, they transformed the house into a nurturing space for learning, play, and growth. Emily's tech projects and Lucas's schoolwork flourished under Marcus's guidance, his steady presence providing the balance Lydia had failed to maintain. He established routines, evening discussions, and shared hobbies that strengthened their bond, creating a sense of normalcy and safety that had been missing for too long. Meanwhile, Lydia's attempts to interfere dwindled. Supervised visitation, legal restrictions, and Marcus's vigilance left little room for manipulation. Over time, she accepted the reality that her actions had consequences she could not escape. The social whispers about her past began to fade as the community observed Marcus's consistent, reliable parenting and Lydia's diminishing influence. She became a peripheral figure in the children's lives, a cautionary tale of deceit and its repercussions. Marcus also found space to care for himself. He explored new interests, reconnected with friends, and cautiously began dating a kind, grounded teacher from the children's school. The contrast between this new relationship and the chaos Lydia had brought into their lives was stark. Marcus realized that life could continue, filled with trust, stability, and genuine connection. Over the following months, Emily and Lucas thrived. Emily received recognition in her robotics competitions and academic programs, often attributing her success to the support and encouragement from Marcus. Lucas developed confidence in his studies and extracurricular activities, feeling secure, knowing his father was the unwavering anchor in his life. The family's home became a place of learning, laughter, and mutual respect, a sanctuary from the past betrayals that had threatened to fracture them. Marcus occasionally reflected on the ordeal. He mourned the marriage he had once cherished, the trust that had been broken, and the daughter he had discovered was not biologically his. Yet he also recognized the resilience he had cultivated, the lessons learned, and the strength of the bond he had nurtured with Emily and Lucas. The past could not be rewritten, but the future was firmly in his hands, guided by integrity, care, and love. Ultimately, Lydia's downfall became a turning point. She lost the freedom she had abused, while Marcus secured the stability and happiness of his children. The scars of betrayal remained, but they were accompanied by growth, clarity, and the triumph of protective, steadfast parenting. Marcus knew that life was unpredictable, but he had created a foundation strong enough to withstand any storm, anchored by love, responsibility, and the lessons of a painful, hard-earned truth. The story closed with Marcus sitting with Emily and Lucas in the backyard, the sun setting gently behind them. They laughed over a small science experiment, Lucas spilling a little water, Emily teasing him lightly. Marcus smiled, realizing that despite all the chaos and betrayal, This calm, this laughter, this security, was the victory he had fought for. The past was settled, the present reclaimed, and the future, for the first time in years, felt entirely their own.